I never thought I'd end up in witness protection, but after testifying against the Romano crime syndicate, I didn't have much of a choice. They said I'd be safe, a new identity, new town, fresh start. All I had to do was disappear. My name was Alex once, but now I go by Jason. Jason Miller. The name still feels strange on my tongue, like it doesn't belong to me. The house they gave me was decent, tucked away in a sleepy little town no one had ever heard of. The kind of place where everyone minds their own business. At least that's what I was told. The first few weeks passed without much trouble. I kept my head down, avoided unnecessary conversations, and followed the rules. No social media, no contact with anyone from my old life. Just lay low and survive. But then things started to feel off. It began small. A letter in my mailbox addressed to Alex Fisher. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a slip-up by the post office or a piece of junk mail. I tossed it without reading. Then, a few days later, I noticed a black sedan parked down the street. It didn't seem out of place at first, but after the third or fourth time I saw it in different spots around town, it started to feel deliberate. I called my handler, Susan, the person responsible for keeping me safe. "It's nothing to worry about," she said. "Probably just someone passing through." Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "You're safe, Jason. We've covered all the bases. Just stay alert, but don't overthink it." But then came the notes. The first one was left at my front door, scribbled on a scrap of paper. "We know who you are." I remember standing there, staring at it, the weight of those words sinking in. I called Susan again, panicking, but she brushed it off as a prank. "People here don't know who you are," she assured me. "It's just some idiot messing with you." Her reassurance didn't stick. Over the next few days, things only got worse. More cars showed up, always different, but always parked in the same spots, as if watching. I started seeing familiar faces too. Once I thought I saw a man I recognized from my old neighborhood back in the city, just casually strolling through the grocery store. It was impossible, right? I had been relocated hundreds of miles away. The breaking point came one night when I returned home from a walk. My front door was cracked open. I hadn't left it that way. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped inside, every instinct telling me to run. The house was still, too still. I made my way to the living room, and that's when I saw it. Photos spread out across my coffee table. They were of me. But not just here in this new life. They were photos of Alex Fisher. Me from before. Me laughing at a bar with friends. Me in my old apartment. And then the last photo, me in this very house just days ago, sitting by the window. I froze, my mind racing. Whoever left those photos wanted me to know one thing. They knew exactly who I was, and they were here watching. I called Susan, my hands shaking, practically screaming into the phone. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't paranoia. "I'm coming over," she said, her voice finally showing a hint of urgency. "Stay calm. We'll handle it." I waited, pacing the floor like my heart in my throat. When Susan arrived, she seemed calm, almost too calm. She walked in, took one look at the photos, and nodded. "Looks like we've got a leak," she said, her eyes narrowing as if piecing something together. "You need to pack up. I'll take you somewhere safe, away from this mess." I didn't argue. I grabbed my things, ready to leave this nightmare behind. As I followed Susan out the door, my mind raced. How did they find me? Had the syndicate really reached this far? We got into her car, and I felt a brief sense of relief. Maybe it was finally over. But as we drove through the empty streets, something gnawed at me. Susan wasn't heading toward the highway. She was taking the back roads, deeper into the countryside, where there were fewer and fewer signs of life. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. "Safe house," she said, her voice tight, "off the grid." But something wasn't right. My gut was screaming at me. I glanced over at her. The tension in her face, the way her knuckles gripped the steering wheel, it all clicked into place. "Susan," I said slowly, "how did they find me?" She didn't answer right away. She just kept driving, eyes focused ahead. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost a whisper. "They didn't find you, Alex," she said, using my real name for the first time in months. "I brought them to you." My blood ran cold. I stared at her in disbelief. "What? You really thought you could get away that easily?" she continued, her voice taking on a different, darker tone. "You put away some powerful people, Alex. People with a lot of money and influence. They wanted you dead, but I convinced them otherwise. You're worth more alive for now. I couldn't breathe. This whole time, the person I trusted, the person who was supposed to protect me, had been working against me. I reached for the door handle, but it was locked. Susan glanced over at me with a cold smile. "Don't even think about it," she warned. "We're not done yet." As we disappeared into the darkness of the countryside, I realized the truth. I wasn't in witness protection anymore. I was a prisoner, and the people I'd feared most had been waiting for this moment all along. The air felt thick, suffocating, as I sat there in the passenger seat. My mind raced through every possible scenario, but there was no easy way out. The betrayal stung deep. Susan, the one person I thought I could trust, had been playing me from the start. We drove for what felt like hours, deeper into the countryside. The road narrowed to a single lane, surrounded by nothing but dense trees and fields stretching out into the darkness. The world outside the window was silent, like it knew what was coming next. I tried to steady my breathing. I couldn't let panic take over. There had to be a way out, but I'd need to play this carefully. "Susan," I said, keeping my voice calm, "why are you doing this? What do you get out of it?" She kept her eyes on the road, her expression unreadable. "It's not personal, Alex. It's business. You're worth a lot to certain people. They wanted to make an example out of you, but I convinced them there were better ways to use you." "You convinced them?" I repeated, trying to stall, trying to figure out my next move. "And what happens to me now?" She gave a small, humorless laugh. "That depends. If you cooperate, you might live long enough to find out," coursing through me. I could feel the adrenaline. The more she talked, the more I knew she wasn't untouchable. She was confident, sure, but everyone has a weakness, and I was going to find hers. I watched the road ahead. In the distance, I could see a faint glow, headlights. Someone was coming. A truck, maybe. For the first time, hope flared in my chest. If I could get the attention of whoever was driving that vehicle, maybe, just maybe, I could get out of this alive. I needed to act fast. "Look, Susan," I said, forcing a resigned tone into my voice. "You win, okay? I'm done fighting this. Just tell me what I have to do." She glanced at me briefly, that cold smile flickering across her face again. "Smart choice, Alex. Just sit tight, and everything will go smoother than you think." Her guard was down. She thought I'd given up. As the truck's headlights grew closer, I made my move. In one swift motion, I slammed my foot onto Susan's, pushing the gas pedal to the floor. The car lurched forward, and she cursed, momentarily losing control of the wheel. The truck's horn blared as it swerved to avoid us, narrowly missing our car. In that brief moment of chaos, I grabbed the steering wheel and jerked it hard to the right. The car careened off the road, crashing into a shallow ditch with a bone-rattling thud. Susan was dazed, but she quickly reached for her gun. I wasn't fast enough to stop her from drawing it, but I wasn't about to give up now. "Don't move," she shouted, the gun trained on me. "You're not walking away from this." I raised my hand slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Susan, think about this. You don't have to do this. You're in deep, but you can still walk away. Turn me in, hand me over to the right people. They don't have to know you were involved." She hesitated, just for a second. Her finger hovered over the trigger, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. That was my opening. Without warning, I lunged at her, grabbing her wrist before she could fire. The gun went off, the shot ringing out in the night, but it missed. We struggled, grappling for control of the weapon as the car's interior became a chaotic blur of movement. In the struggle, I managed to twist her arm and force the gun from her hand. I threw it out of reach, panting from the effort. She tried to claw at me, but I pushed her back, pinning her to the driver's seat. "You can't win this," she spat, her voice venomous. "They're going to find you. You'll never be safe." "I've heard that before," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. I fumbled with the door, finally managing to unlock it and climb out. My body ached from the crash, but I had no time to think about it. I staggered up the road, scanning for the truck that had passed us. To my relief, the truck had stopped just a few hundred yards up the road. The driver had gotten out, clearly trying to figure out what had happened. I waved my arms, calling out for help. The driver, a burly man in his 50s, hurried over, his flashlight bouncing in the darkness. "Hey, you all right?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I need your phone," I gasped. "Call the police, now." The driver didn't ask questions. He handed me his phone, and I quickly dialed the emergency number, giving them our location and explaining the situation as best I could. By the time the police arrived, Susan was still in the car, seething but subdued. I watched as they cuffed her and led her away, her betrayal still sinking in. As the officers took my statement, one of them, a younger man with sharp eyes, looked at me and said, "You're lucky. Most people in your situation don't get a second chance." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I had survived, but barely. Later, I was placed in a new safe house under the care of a different handler. This time, I'd be more careful. I'd be smarter. The people I had testified against were still out there, but now I knew who to trust and who not to. This time, I wasn't just hiding, I was prepared. And if they came for me again, I'd be ready. I never thought I'd be here, living in a small, quiet suburban neighborhood, constantly looking over my shoulder. It was supposed to be my fresh start, my escape. After blowing the whistle on a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme, my life was shattered. I had to leave everything behind: friends, family, a career I worked hard for. The authorities moved me into witness protection, gave me a new name, a new life. Lisa Thompson, a simple, forgettable name. I didn't mind. It was all for safety, or so I thought. At first, everything was fine. My house was nice. Nothing fancy, but it had a comfortable, homey feel. The neighbors were friendly enough, not too nosy. I spent my days trying to adapt, getting used to a routine that didn't involve fear and hiding. But something didn't sit right with me. There were moments, glances, whispers in the street that made my skin crawl. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like someone was watching me. It started small. A man in a dark jacket passing by the house, too often to be a coincidence. At first, I thought maybe he was just another resident, but then I noticed how he always looked at me. Not just a quick glance, but a deliberate stare. Every time I went to the store, he was there, standing a few aisles away, watching. It was unsettling. I told my protection officer about it. Of course, he reassured me. "It's just your paranoia. People are naturally cautious in new environments, Lisa. You're safe here." I wanted to believe him. Really, I did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man appeared more frequently, always in the same spots, never getting too close, but always there. I started to avoid my usual routines, taking different routes to the store, staying inside more. I tried to blend in, but that made things worse. I was becoming a prisoner in my own life. One afternoon, as I was walking to my car, I saw him again. This time, he was standing right across the street, his eyes locked onto mine. I froze. I knew I had to confront him. I walked toward him, my heart racing. "Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you want from me?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner. I quickly rushed back to my house, locking the door behind me. My breath was coming fast, my head spinning. I called my protection officer once more, this time in a panic. "I need to leave," I told him. "I'm not safe here. I'm being watched." "Lisa, calm down," he said, his voice too calm, too dismissive. "You're overreacting. No one is watching you. Just stay inside and everything will be fine." I wanted to scream at him, but instead I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing footsteps outside my window, the creak of the floorboards like someone was moving around the house. I'd convinced myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew I was in danger. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I packed a bag and went to the car. I had to leave. I couldn't stay in this house any longer, under the watchful eyes of whoever was hunting me. I drove away, not knowing where I was going, just away from there. I didn't stop until I reached a nearby town, desperate for any kind of safety. I went to a small motel and checked in under a fake name. The weight on my shoulders finally started to lift. I didn't feel as trapped anymore. I was free, at least for now. But then I checked my phone and everything came crashing down. My protection officer had sent me a text. "Lisa, I need you to come back. They found you." My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. They found me? How could that be? I had made sure to cover my tracks. There was no way anyone could know where I was. And then it hit me. The truth. I wasn't being followed by a stranger. I wasn't being watched by someone from my past. I was being watched by someone who was supposed to be protecting me. My protection officer had leaked my location. He had been the one orchestrating everything, and now there was nowhere left to hide. I stood there in the motel room, the phone still trembling in my hand, as the weight of the message settled in. They found you. My breath caught in my throat. It didn't make sense. How could they have found me? I'd been so careful, so paranoid about covering my tracks. I had to be wrong, right? It couldn't be him. But deep down I knew. It wasn't a coincidence. I didn't wait long. I grabbed my bag, not bothering to pack anything else, and rushed to the car. I had to confront him. If my protection officer was involved, then everything had been a lie. He was supposed to keep me safe, but he was the one who betrayed me. He'd set this all up, leaking my location, orchestrating the surveillance, all while pretending to help me. As I drove back toward the city, I realized how badly I'd underestimated him. I thought I could trust him. He had been my lifeline when I had nothing left. But now, I was just a pawn in his game. My mind raced, trying to figure out how I could expose him, how I could get justice, before it was too late. When I arrived at his office, I parked across the street and waited. I wasn't sure if I should just walk in or if I should call him. But one thing was clear. I wasn't leaving until I had answers. I watched his car pull into the parking lot, and he walked into the building like it was just another day. That's when I knew I had to act fast. I slipped out of the car and, without thinking, made my way into the building. The security guard barely glanced at me as I passed, probably because I was dressed in a business suit, trying to blend in as just another civilian. My heart pounded, but I kept moving forward, the adrenaline giving me focus. I found his office on the 3rd floor, his name clearly marked on the door. I knocked lightly at first, but when I heard his voice from inside, I pushed the door open. He was sitting behind his desk, sorting through papers, completely caught off guard. "Lisa," he said, standing up quickly, but not surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Don't play dumb with me," I snapped. My voice shook, but I had to stay calm. "You've been lying to me this whole time. You leaked my location. You've been watching me, haven't you?" His face didn't change. He was a professional, too calm. "I don't know what you're talking about, Lisa. You've been under a lot of stress. You need to go back to your safe house." "Stop! I know what you did." I felt the panic rising in my chest, but I kept my focus. "You've been feeding information to them. The man who's been following me, he's one of them, isn't he?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped toward me, his hands held up in mock surrender. "I'm trying to protect you, Lisa. You don't understand. This isn't how it seems." My blood ran cold. "Then what is it? Explain it to me. How are you involved in all of this?" He sighed and sat back down in his chair, his posture shifting. "I've been keeping an eye on you for your own good. There are bigger forces at play here, things you can't even comprehend. The people who want you dead, they aren't just some criminals. They're powerful. They have connections, people everywhere, even inside the witness protection program." A chill ran down my spine. It was true then. He was involved, but not in the way I thought. He hadn't been working alone. He wasn't just the one who had leaked my location. He was part of a much larger conspiracy. A conspiracy that reached into the very program that was supposed to protect me. "You don't have much time," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "They'll be coming for you soon, and there's nothing I can do to stop it." I froze, trying to process what he was saying. "What do you mean, nothing you can do? You're supposed to protect me." "I've been trying to keep them off your trail, but they already know everything. The leak was inevitable," he said, looking down at his hands. "I'm not your protector, Lisa. I'm your handler, and this is the end of the line for you." I didn't wait for him to finish. I bolted out of his office, my mind racing. I had to get away. I had to act fast. I couldn't let him have the last word. I made a quick call to my old lawyer, the only person I could trust from my past life. He was surprised to hear from me, but promised to help. "They can't protect you forever, Lisa, but I can get you out of the country. I have a contact. He can help you disappear for good." I didn't hesitate. I made my way to the contact's location and, in the dead of night, boarded a flight to a foreign country with a new name. I stayed low, avoiding any contact with the outside world. Over time, I slowly started to build a life for myself again, far from the man who had betrayed me. I never learned what truly happened to my former protection officer, but I didn't care. He got away with his betrayal, but in the end, I was free. I had escaped. The price of my survival was steep, but it was the only choice I had left. I would never forget the lessons I learned from the darkest chapter of my life. Trust was a fragile thing, and sometimes the people you think are protecting you are the ones you should fear the most.